Welcome back to Basics, where we're going to take a look at the OODA Loop, also known as the Boyd cycle, after John Boyd, who codified it. It's a really useful concept to apply to tactics, offering a lens to look through that focuses on decision-making processes, especially in a competitive environment. If that sounds at all intimidating, don't worry, you go through the OODA Loop all the time. OODA simply stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. And we can easily explain that by thinking about crossing a road. First, you observe. You look to see if there are any cars coming. Let's say that there aren't. Now you can orient yourself. You can process your observations to understand that no cars means it's safe to cross the road. Because you've established the situation, you can make a decision. It's safe, so you're going to cross. Finally, you can act on that decision and step out into the road. It's that simple. But it's also a loop. Situations change, so we need to keep going round the OODA loop to take those changes into account. So let's say that you're halfway across the road and a car appears. Not only has the situation changed and necessitated another loop, but now we have some time pressure. You better see the car, realize the danger, make a decision, and act before you get hit by it. There are obvious advantages to having a fast OODA loop. How can we make it faster? Well, in this case, we can probably observe a lot of detail, the type and color of the car, the number plate, the driver's face, but they're all a lot less important than a quick impression of how fast the car is going, how far away it is, and what those factors mean for us. There's a lot of information out there, and we can pick a lot of it up, but it's not all going to be useful. And a key element of properly orienting ourselves, of properly processing the information we get, is to understand what information is relevant. If we can strip out unnecessary information, we can orient ourselves faster and get to deciding and acting faster. A major factor of that is existing knowledge and experience. We all know what a fast-moving car looks like, and we all know we're going to have a bad day if one hits us, so we can register oncoming traffic as a threat very quickly. But, continuing our example, we also need to bear in mind that the driver of the car also has an OODA loop. When they see you in the middle of the road, they're going to realize they're going to hit you. And then they're going to make a decision to avoid you and then try and carry it out. So now we have two OODA loops running at the same time, and this is where things get interesting, because whoever completes their loop first is going to take an action that will change the situation. Let's say you act first and get out of the road. Wherever the driver is on their loop, their progress has now been invalidated, and they have to start again with the fresh observation that you're no longer in the road. There are a few important concepts here. The first is that although we talk about an OODA loop like one cycle, it's really not. You are probably going to be constantly observing and orienting, even if you're only processing that nothing has changed. It's kind of loops all the way down. Second, that it's possible for OODA loops to be interrupted, reset, or stalled. In our crossing the road example, we have two actors who are not competing. Neither you nor the driver want to be in a collision. You both have the same end goal, so the fact that you've disrupted the driver's OODA loop probably doesn't bother them. But in a competitive environment, being able to go through the OODA loop faster than your opponent can give you a lot of advantages. Your opponent might end up doing something inappropriate to the new situation, they might be caught off balance and vulnerable, or they might even do nothing at all and get paralyzed as developments keep resetting their loop. Third, we can think about the different limitations that you have, standing in the road, and the car driver has as they hurtle towards you. The car has speed and momentum. Even if the driver has a lightning-fast OODA loop and they slam the brakes on the instant they see you, the car will take time to stop. It has characteristics outside of the driver's OODA loop that limit the speed the driver's actions can take effect. And of course, a fast OODA loop doesn't give you capabilities in and all of itself. You have a faster OODA loop than a wall, but if you punch the wall's going to win. So how does all this work in a military context? The OODA loop is obviously nothing new, and it touches on a lot of components of military thought. So let's think about how we can speed our own OODA loop up and slow down the enemies so that we can gain an advantage. In our crossing the road example, we had two individual actors, so there wasn't any question about who was making the decisions. But warfare is a group activity, and exactly what level in the hierarchy decision makers occupy can have dramatic effects on the speed of an OODA loop. Centralized decision making is generally slower because information has to be communicated through more levels of organization. This makes decentralized decision making attractive if we want a faster OODA loop. Our company commanders can be changing a situation on the ground, while the enemy's company commanders are waiting for their battalion commander to get back to them with their orders. We can also speed up our OODA loop through good training. Realistic training that accurately replicates battlefield conditions creates experience that soldiers can draw on to improve how fast they can orient themselves. Conversely, unrealistic training not only produces inapplicable experience that slows the OODA loop down, but can introduce paralyzing shock and surprise when soldiers have their expectations subverted. Flexibility is also critical. It doesn't matter how fast you can observe, orient, and decide if your forces are incapable of deviating from a pre-planned script. That's not just mental flexibility, the capacity to examine the situation and come up with new courses of action, but physical and practical flexibility. In order to exploit a fast OODA loop, troops need to be able to move fast, pre-position themselves to react to potential situations, and be equipped to deal with a multitude of threats. An infantry unit that needs to contest an enemy armoured breakthrough isn't going to be much use if it can't get into position in time or it doesn't have any anti-tank weapons. So what about slowing down the enemy's OODA loop? The most obvious way to mess with someone else's decision making is to keep changing the situation faster than they can react. Seizing and then maintaining the initiative with a high tempo of operations is not easy, but it can put increasing stress on opposing OODA loops, causing them to slow down further, become paralyzed, or collapse. Surprise is a key means of getting a foot in the door. Surprise represents a sudden change in situation, one that you are not only already aware of, but actually creating, and one that the enemy has to reset their OODA loop to deal with. In a similar vein, concealment and deception can be used to introduce uncertainty into the enemy's OODA loop. Obviously, the less accurate information an opponent has available, the less material is going into his orient, and in theory, the less appropriate his decisions and actions will be. Deception is the other side of that coin, seeking to create uncertainty by presenting an opponent with multiple plausible interpretations of the situation. It's risky to act on limited or contradictory information, and there's always great temptation to wait and see if more information comes in to clarify the situation, a temptation that slows down the OODA loop and gives a faster opponent an advantage. So that is a very quick, very shallow overview of the OODA loop. The important thing to remember here is that this is an analytical concept. Surprise, training, deception, decentralization, these aren't new ideas, but the OODA loop gives us a mental framework that focuses on their effects and how they interact. Hope you all enjoyed this one. You can watch all these videos early on Patreon and via YouTube membership if you'd like to support the channel. Whether you do or not, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.